yield to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stubbe, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I thank you for the opportunity today. Today, in a hearing entitled The Rise of Domestic Terrorism in America, all I have heard from the Democrats on this committee and from their witnesses is white supremacy and far-right extremism, while completely ignoring the riots, destruction, and violence of Antifa and BLM we saw all last year and that continues. All forms of domestic terrorism are criminal, but in order to properly address the threats, we need to talk about all types of domestic terrorism, including Antifa and BLM. The Democrats have chosen to either ignore, condone, or even embrace this violence from Antifa and Black Lives Matter. The Democratic majority and Democratic members of this committee have downplayed Antifa's violence and status as domestic terrorist organizations. They have claimed that Antifa keeps, quote, protesters safe when a lot of other folks won't, and stated that Antifa is, quote, false issue and, quote, a myth. The term domestic terrorism is defined in federal law as, quote, involving acts dangerous to human life that are in violation of the criminal laws of the United States or of any state and appear to be intended to intimidate, coerce a civilian population, to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. At this time, I'd like to play a video. Please don't tell me what to do. Thank you. Mr. Henderson, after watching that video and listening to the reading of my definition under federal law of what domestic terrorism is, I ask you, do you believe that what you saw in that video meets the elements of domestic terrorism? Yes or no?
I will respond simply by saying we can all condemn violence.
I'm asking you to answer the question, yes or no?
I will not. No, I will not answer it yes or no.
Okay, well, I'll take that as a no. Mr. German, this is my time. Mr. German, Mr. German, the video that you just watched, do you define that? Would you call that domestic terrorism, yes or no?
Again, unless
it's very easy. You just watched the video of what occurred. Yes or no? Do you determine that under the federal law of domestic terrorism? Yes or no? Yes or no?
That's the problem. You're showing a piece of video.
I'll give Mr. Nance.
The gentleman is not allowing the witness to answer the question.
No, I gave a question which is yes or no. That's how they can answer. Mr. Nance, yes or no? You're on mute.
No, it's civil disobedience. We have codes for that.
So that's civil disobedience, burning down, creating $80 billion worth of damage across our country. That's civil disobedience. But what occurred here on January 6th was domestic terrorism. I yield that.
Okay, over the last 2 years, Congress has held over 7 committee hearings on domestic terrorism. The topics they covered were important, but the vast majority were topics such as confronting white supremacy. However, what has been lacking to me is a specific hearing on the violence from the left-wing extremists that destroyed so many Black lives and businesses over the summer of 2020. At least 25 people were killed, murdered last summer as a result of left-wing violence that was called, and many times, peaceful protests. The estimate is over $2 billion of damage that caused looting and other criminal behavior. The horrible riots occurred in inner cities, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Chicago, and earlier, a couple years ago, Ferguson and Baltimore. Some of the greatest casualties of these violent riots have always been minority businesses, inner cities that are mostly destroyed forever. By the way, we do condone all violence, and that's been the message we've been given across the board. It doesn't matter which side it is, hard left or hard right. When people are put into misery, that are being bullied, we should all stand against it immediately, not months later. Mr. No, in light of the damage done by the violent protests last summer, where is the damage to inner city and minority businesses, communities, trying to find the American way, trying to make a living? Where has this damage been mostly done, Mr. No?
So in Portland, there's one example that stands out a lot. There was a Black-owned cafe, Heroes Cafe in Southwest Portland, and the business has photographs of first responders and law enforcement, and some of the proceeds are donated to some pro-law enforcement organizations. That business got put on a list by one of the Antifa groups in Portland. And then after the statue of Abraham Lincoln was toppled last autumn, that same night, somebody shot through this business several times, and someone using a melee weapon smashed up some windows. So this is like the real on the ground damage of what their campaign of terrorism does. And they do it in an organized manner under groups on Twitter, on social media. And, you know, we've been naming anecdotes left and right of mass shootings and killings that have happened in the US perpetrated by the far right. I just want to set for the record that in August of 2019, after the shooting in El Paso, Texas, in Dayton, Ohio, there was a far left extremist who killed 9 people and injured 27 others. In his social media before it was taken down, he showed his affiliation for Antifa. Somebody had recognized him when he had gone to Antifa protests previously. In January, the FBI recently arrested a suspect in Florida who had gone to Syria, and on his social media has a long history of posts in support of espousing support for Antifa. So I hope that, you know, with lawmakers, we can entrust you to move beyond the which side is worse than the other and start talking about how do we come up with laws to keep all
Gentleman's
Americans
time
safe.
has expired. Thank you.
I yield back. Thank you.
It's reported that, and I'm quoting, the feds allege in a criminal complaint that John Sullivan, was actively participating in encouraging the siege around the Capitol. He helped one of the rioters scale a wall leading up to an entrance of the Capitol, an affidavit alleges. It says, another New York Post, John Sullivan founded Insurgents USA, a protest group for racial justice and police reform, and referred to himself as activist John, filling his Twitter feeds with anti-President Trump rhetoric and posts supporting Black Lives Matter. I'd like to, there's a picture of Mr. Sullivan's website, Insurgents USA, and you see he's identifies with Antifa, I believe. It's hard to see those, but certainly not a Trump supporter. In fact, we've got a video, got 2 videos I'd like to play very quickly.
What's going on, everybody? My name is John Sullivan. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. My group is Insurgents USA. We fucking about to burn this shit down. Fuck this shit. There's power to the people! Power to the people! Power to the people! Damn right. We got fucking rip Trump out of that office right over there. Fucking pull him out that shit. Nah, we ain't about fucking waiting until the next election. We about to go get that motherfucker.
Not sounding like a Trump supporter, as this was before his violence and entry to the Capitol. believe we got one more if it can be played quickly enough.
We did it.
This is him recording this.
Dude, I was trying to tell you. I couldn't say much.
You were right.
You just have to watch my chat.
Yeah, she's saying you were right, because he had obviously planned on getting into the Capitol. He had told her they could get into the Capitol. This was planned in advance, and here they go through the Capitol. So it's kind of hard to sit and listen that all of the problems were white supremacists when we know that last summer, estimated $2 billion, many deaths, many injuries, deaths including David Dorn, that was just simply trying to protect a business and stop the looting and the violence there, and he lost his life because of it. Our hearts go out to Officer Sicknick, but let me tell you, Democrats have never come to understand that one of the more insightful things that they do is not only to misrepresent things as they did the Russia hoax, but then turn around and try to silence Republicans or opposing views, get them off the internet. And when you seal up a pressure cooker and continue to taunt it, test it, heat it, it's not going to work out well. I deplore all violence. I condemn all violence. But let's work together toward a peaceful resolution instead of only seeing one side as the other side does. We on this side see there's problems on both sides. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, Mr. Gomer, and I think all of us collaborate on our opposition to violence. I think we cannot ignore the penetrating white supremacy and white nationalism that has generated violence. Thank you for your remarks.
White supremacy, white supremacists, white supremacy, genocide.